Well, good morning, Radiant Church, friends and family. My name is Weston. I am the volunteer campus pastor here at our Pleasant Hill campus, and I am so thankful that you have chosen to join us this morning. When I was younger, I was called a lot of different things, but one thing that my family called me was a bubble boy. And essentially what that means is that I needed to live in a virtual bubble to stay healthy and survive. And that's really no different than any other young boy that I know of. But when I was younger, I was tested for allergies. And we found that I was allergic to virtually everything that you could think of. A lot of things that I was allergic to were the things that most people are allergic to, like medications, dust, mold, pollen, and ragweed. But there were a couple other things that I was actually excited to be allergic to. For instance, one thing that I'm allergic to is tobacco. So really growing up, I really never had a desire to smoke cigarettes because I knew that it would have a negative effect on me. Something else that I found that I was allergic to that brought me great joy was that I was allergic to cats because cats are evil, and that kept me away from evil. Just kidding to all you cat lovers out there. But I'm allergic to cats. But there is something that I found that I was allergic to that I had to learn to live with, and that is that I am allergic to dairy. Not that I am lactose intolerant, but I am allergic to dairy. And that made the breakfast routine very interesting at my house. So if you're at home enjoying breakfast, imagine having a bowl of Lucky Charms or Cinnamon Toast Crunch without the milk. Seriously, that's what it was like. And if you want to try changing up your breakfast routine, I encourage you to give it a shot and see how you like it. Some of the other things that I've found I was allergic to in the dairy department that I had to learn to do without is chocolate milk. And oh, how I love chocolate milk, and even ice cream. Now, fast forward to when I was 16, I did what most 16-year-old boys do when they go home from school. I dropped my backpack off in the middle of the living room and went directly to the refrigerator. I scoured the refrigerator to find anything that I could devour. And after looking through top to bottom, front to back, I found nothing that would really satisfy my appetite. So I closed the refrigerator door and went to the freezer. And there, to my delight, was a full container of Van and Bonbon ice cream. Now, they don't make Van and Bonbon ice cream anymore, but it was basically a full container of vanilla ice cream with chocolate and caramel swirl all through it, with little chunks of candy bonbons. Some bonbons were filled with caramel, so it was like enjoying a tiny Rolo. Some were filled with peanut butter, so it was kind of like enjoying a miniature Reese's peanut butter cup. So I did again what any 16-year-old boy would do. I took that full carton out of the freezer, went and got a spoon, and plopped myself in the living room to devour the ice cream. Now, I have ice cream etiquette, and I know that you should eat your ice cream. When eating your ice cream out of the container, you should eat it by eating it layer after layer after layer. I am not a savage who digs in the ice cream, creating massive craters in their ice cream. I enjoy it layer by layer. And as I did that, about 20 minutes had passed, and I looked down and noticed that over half of the ice cream was gone. Now, to my surprise, I couldn't remember eating any bonbons. So I thought to myself, and I recognized my voice. So I thought, had this ice cream previously melted and all the bonbons had gone to the bottom, and at the bottom was a treasure trove of bonbons? Or did I get the 1 in a million carton of ice cream that has no bonbons in it? And if I were to get to the bottom of said container of ice cream and didn't find any bonbons, could I take the empty carton back to the store and get another container of Van and Bonbon ice cream? So again, I did what every 16-year-old boy would do. At this point, I went full savage and was digging into the ice cream as it was melting around the edges. And a short period of time later, I had reached the bottom of the ice cream container, and there were no bonbons. I had a horrible pit in my stomach, and I recognized that before, but typically I have a horrible pit in my stomach when I overconsume food, but there is a sense of satisfaction in my soul because I've accomplished something great. This time, there was no sense of satisfaction at all because there were no bonbons. And about an hour after that, my mom had come home from work to find me on the couch, still there with an empty container of ice cream. But by this time, I was wheezing because I was having an allergic reaction to the amount of ice cream that I had consumed. All this to say, I survived the incident with the ice cream container at my house when I was 16 years old. But it begs the question, have you ever been so dissatisfied with the very thing that's right in front of you that it nearly kills you? Welcome to week 2 of our sermon series, Spring Cleaning, Ditching the Junk and Revealing What Matters Most. In this sermon series, we're talking about the things I think that we all struggle with at times so that we can have conversation around it. Discover what the Bible says about it so that we can enter in a new season of life, dealing with things in a more healthy fashion. Last week, Pastor Ben talked to us about the importance of taking a Sabbath day and the importance and biblical reasons of why we should rest. And today I'm going to be talking about being content. That's right. Are you content? Or would the person that you're sitting next to call you a content person? Now, I'm not trying to start an argument in your own home, and I myself have found that I am not a content person. And after all, how can I be? Society typically actually pushes us towards being discontent. We're bombarded with stuff all day long, whether it's advertisements, radio, or on television, or even on our phone. The whole purpose of marketing and advertisement is to make you so discontent in life that you get off your couch and you go spend money on their product. We're bombarded with it, and even in this political year, we're bombarded with more propaganda and information that says, be so discontent at your situation that you join our side and you join our forces. And it's not just in the news, it's on Facebook as well, and if you're not careful, discontent can creep into your social media. I myself, we moved into our new home about 10 years ago, and the home is beautiful. But it's filled with honey oak cabinetry all over the house from the late 90s. And it doesn't take long for you to be on Facebook and notice that all your friends are changing their woodwork, changing out their cabinets to dark or even white, painting their trim. And have you ever looked at Facebook and gone, man, what if my kitchen had white cabinets? What if we redid our floors? What if we did our bathroom? Our life would be so much better and our home would be so much more enjoyable if we just painted the cabinets. We could entertain and have people over again because we don't do that anymore. But if we had new floors, then we could do it. This is a way that discontentment can creep in on social media. When you look at your friends' homes or the vacations they took, man, I would be so much happier if I did that. Or maybe if I took a vacation there, I would have joy. Now, as I talk to you about contentment, I realize I have no grounds to stand on because I myself am a discontent person. So today I'm going to be talking about King Solomon in Ecclesiastes and how he talks about being discontent and how we should be content. Now, for those of you who might not know, King Solomon was the wisest person in history. Kings and queens gathered from all over the region to learn from him. Portions of the Bible are written by him about wisdom and folly. King Solomon not only had wisdom, but he had riches. He had palaces, built temples to God. He had gold stacked high as mountains that you could ski down. He had so much gold that they say that silver virtually had no value in his time. And he wasn't short on companionship either. He had friends and friends galore. He had hundreds of wives and thousands of concubines. This is a guy, by our worldly standards, had achieved it all. And yet, in Ecclesiastes 6, he's sitting much later in his life, discontent and asking the questions on true contentment. And I love taking a lesson from him because he's actually a guy who's been there. Have you ever tried to get advice from someone who hasn't been there? It's like getting parenting advice from a person who has never been a parent. Now, it's well-intended and it's good, but it's so much better to get good parenting advice from a parent who has been there and experienced it. And that is exactly what we're getting when we open Ecclesiastes and learn from Solomon. Now, let me preface, because we had a lot of conversation about contentment and discontentment in our house, and it seems as though there's a negative stigma that comes with being called discontent. And let me suggest to you this morning that there actually is a good type of discontent. I would like to call it a godly discontent. A godly discontent is when you look at the fullness of your life and you realize that either because of your sin or because of your laziness, that you're not living in the fullness of everything that God has given to you. So you make some changes. Ungodly discontent is when you look at the fullness of your life and everything that God has given you and you don't like it. You wish you didn't have it. You're not satisfied with who you are or who God's created you to be, and instead you wish that you were something else or had something else. Let me give you an example. Godly discontent could be when you wake up in the morning, you walk into the bathroom and you step onto the scale and you see a number on the scale that you don't really like at all. But because of what you saw on the scale, it drives you to think, maybe I should make some healthy choices in my life. Maybe I should change my diet. Maybe I should start exercising. Maybe I should be the leader in my family and be an example of what healthy living is like. Because maybe someday if God blesses me with children or grandchildren, I want to be healthy enough and at a stage of life where I'm not just sitting in a chair watching life go by, but I want to be an active participant in my grandchildren's life. So you make the changes to be who and what God has created you to be. Now take the ungodly discontent. Maybe you don't even jump on the scale anymore because you know what the scale is going to read. You're dissatisfied with who you are and who God's created you to be, and instead you surf the internet or magazines wishing you were someone you were not. Meanwhile, eating a bag of Doritos and washing it down with a 2-liter of Diet Coke for breakfast. It's ungodly discontent. How about one more? Godly discontent is when a couple in their marriage realizes that their marriage isn't exactly where it needs to be. And instead of throwing in the towel, they decide to deepen their relationship with one another and deepen their relationship and understanding with God so that they can live a life and legacy that their family would be proud of. Ungodly discontent is when you're not satisfied with your marriage. You wish you were married to somebody else, and quite honestly, you wish that your spouse was probably the person down the street, acted like them, looked like them, and you start fantasizing what life would be like without them. That's ungodly discontent. So here we find ourselves in Ecclesiastes 6, and Solomon is telling us what it is to be discontent. And number one, Solomon tells us, discontent cannot be cured by money. Now, the Bible speaks highly on work and the attitude of work, and even that work can be our act of worship. Even when you open the Bible in Genesis, God is busy at work creating everything. And for 6 days, God worked, and then on the 7th, he took a day of rest. That's what Ben talked about last week, and we should follow the same example. But when we find our value in our work, or when we pursue money, it won't lead to a content life. Here's an example in my own life. 20 years ago, when my wife and I started off, we were so broke. We qualified for every government assistance program that was out there. And I remember having these thoughts, if only I could get 40 hours at work, maybe 40 hours plus a little bit of overtime, then I would have enough money to pay the bills. And after God blessed me with making 40 hours and a little bit of overtime, maybe if I worked the night shift and got that shift differential, if I got 10% more money, we wouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck. And lo and behold, God blessed us with that. But soon after, we got to a point, and I was like, maybe if I became a supervisor, I would be making this much money, and no one would be telling me what to do, but I would be calling the shots. King Solomon, one of the wealthiest people out there, says, no matter how much wealth you have, it cannot cure discontent. What about you? Where were you 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago? Did you ever have those thoughts that if only I made 10% more, life would be so much better. I'd be able to do these things. And now, 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, you have those things. Are you still having those same thoughts? That's why some of the most wealthiest people in the world are still the most discontent people. Number 2, Solomon challenges us and tells us that discontent cannot be cured by intellect. Now, this is coming from Solomon, one of the wisest people of the Bible. He's written at least 3 books of the Bible. He speaks highly on living a wise life and having wisdom versus being a fool. Wisdom for the Christian is living life according to God's word and God's ways. Foolishness is living life according to worldly wisdom. And here's the sad truth that I have for you this morning is we live in a fallen world, and sometimes foolish people can prosper. I see it all around me. I look at that individual and I'm like, how did they make it there? How in the world could that happen? But at the end of the day, because we live in a fallen world, sometimes unfair things happen all the time and foolish people can prosper. But that doesn't give us the excuse to stop pursuing wisdom. I will always tell you, and I would tell my kids, pursue wisdom. Do what is right. Chase what is noble. But have you ever had those thoughts, man, if I would have only gone to college, my life would have been different. It would have been better because of this. If I would have only finished college, maybe if I would have only gotten my bachelor's degree, it could be different. It'd be better to be this. Or if I would have gotten my master's, I could be this. Discontent is not cured by intellect. Number 3, discontent is not cured by friendship or relationship. I'll have to take it from King Solomon here. He had no issue with companionship. He had hundreds of wives and thousands of concubines, so I've got to trust him that just having relationships in and of themselves will not make you a content person. But have you ever thought to yourself, man, I wish I was more extroverted. I wish I was the life of the party. We know those types of people. I have friends who are those type of people, and I love hanging out with them. They walk into a room, and it's like cheers. They're like, Norm, you're here. And they can walk into the center of any conversation and just keep the conversation flowing, and it's just so awesome to be a part of that. Do you wish that you were more like them? And that life would be so much better if you only had social skills? Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Life is enjoyable if you have or practice social skills. But just because you have 1,000 friends or a whole bunch of people following you on social media does not guarantee a life of contentment. And we can learn this from Jesus. Jesus had thousands of acquaintances, but really only 12 disciples following him. And even with that, the lesson we can learn from Jesus is friends will sometimes betray you and crowds can abandon you. So true discontentment cannot be cured by relationships or friendships. Number 4, discontentment cannot be cured by making plans. And man, I struggle with this because I am a scheduled person. I love making plans. Have you ever had a dream? If you have a dream, you make a plan. A plan is what brings the dream into fruition. And plans in and of themselves aren't bad. Plans are actually very biblical. Jesus tells us to make a plan for our lives. He says, make a plan for your lives and count the costs. The Bible even says that God has a plan for your life. The problem with planning is that some people are so good at planning and casting vision, they're like a lighthouse, casting vision onto the horizon. And they miss the very important things in the lives right at their footsteps. See, some people live in the past with regret, and other people live in the future in the dreamland, when we need more and more people to live in the present and be there for the people that are right here in their lives today. Have you ever made a plan to better your life? And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but this is what I've done. Man, if I only had a car, if I had a car, I could go here and I could do these things. So I make a plan. I save money for this car. And after a year or two, I have enough money to buy the car. And surely enough, that first year, I take care of that car every weekend. I wash, I wax, and I vacuum out that car. But by year 2, that car smells like Happy Meals and dirty feet. And by this time, you're thinking, man, if I only had a truck, then my life would be so much better. I'd be able to do these things. And you make a plan and you save and so on and so forth. And did that plan truly give you contentment? So here are the things that Solomon says will bring you contentment. You can have a content life if you accept your destiny. If you accept who you are, whose you are, and who holds the future. See, the future is closed off to us, but it's totally open to God. The future is waiting for us to discover it, but God sees beginning to end. In Ecclesiastes 6, verse 10, it says there's no use even arguing with God because he knows your future. He knows what will happen. He knows who you will become. And you might be thinking to yourself this morning, well, that's not fair. When I was in school, my teacher, I could swear, said, if you could be anything, if you put your mind to it. I could be the president. I could be an astronaut. I love basketball. I could dunk a basketball. Tell you what, that's not always the case. I've got a good friend. His name's Mike. He's 6'3". He's 5'3". I misspoke. He's 5'3", and he would love to dunk a basketball. But the reality is, as much as he puts his mind to it, he will not be able to dunk a basketball unless he hits a growth spurt at the age of 40. So many things, there's no use even arguing with God. We just need to accept who we are, whose we are, and who holds our destiny. And so many of us struggle with this concept. Oftentimes we struggle with this concept because we have an unhealthy view of who God is. Some people believe that God is sovereign, but he's not loving. So he's more like a dictator calling all the shots and has really no regard for what we want or who we are. While other people have an unhealthy view of who God is and don't necessarily see him as sovereign, but they just see him as loving teddy bear with no spine. And the reality is that God is both sovereign and loving. He's like a loving father that desires desperately to have a loving relationship with all of his children. He wants to have a relationship and listen to him. But at the end of the day, like a loving father, he's inevitably going to call the right shot, whether we agree with the shot or not. Step 2, you can be content if you trust God with your life and your legacy. There's really only 3 options here. Is your life and legacy in the hands of Satan? Is it in the hands of you? Or is it in the hands of God? Now, if I were to take a poll out there, I doubt I would find very many people willing to say, yep, Satan's in control. It's going well. Probably not. Most people that I talk to would admit that they are calling the shots in their own life. And let me ask you this morning, how well is that going for you? I know in my life I've tried to call the shots far too many times. And it works, yeah. It works for a little while. But inevitably, because of my sin and or my laziness, I start to struggle again. I start getting into the things I shouldn't be doing. Relationships are damaged. Shoot, I've nearly ruined my marriage on multiple occasions because I've chosen to call the shots instead of letting God do it. In reality, God is far better equipped to call the shots in our lives. He is more sovereign than I could ever be, more loving than I could ever hope to be, more gracious, more forgiving, more capable. And when I allow God to be God, it frees me up from trying to be someone that I'm not. True contentment can be found if you give your life and legacy over to God. So I'm going to end it with Jesus. So much of our lives are in pursuit of what Solomon had already achieved: wisdom, money, relationships. So much of what we do on a daily basis is trying our best to grasp the greatest kingdom we could try to build for ourselves here on earth. And the greatest example of what we should be doing is not what society is teaching us, but what Bible is teaching us to do. In which, if we look at Jesus, Jesus was literally in heaven. He was seated at the right hand of God the Father. He was worshiped and adored by angels. And in a moment, left it all to be here with us, to teach us a new and a better way so that we actually may experience what true contentment is, true happiness, true peace, and an avenue to a real, everlasting heaven. Please consider these words in the moments to come, in the days to come, and have a conversation with those you love and even your small groups. Would you pray with me? Father God, I just thank you for this lesson. I thank you for what your word said, and I'm sorry. For far too long, I have tried to write my own script for life, and I've tried to hand over that script to you and say, here, make this happen. Make me happy. And God, over and over again, you're handing the Bible back to me and said, find out who I am. True contentment and joy and peace are found in God. And God, I pray this morning that we can just wrestle with our contentment where we are. And truly, in the days and moments, weeks to come, pursue you more than anything else. It's in your name I pray. Amen.